Well, we'll give a couple minutes here for Bill to pop on, but I think generally, today we're going to talk about the fractional CTO business model and how that can work. Hopefully Bill will still be able to join us about his specific model. One thing to note with his model is, he comes in kind of as an independent consultant. And so he is doing a lot of things himself, right? So it's really about kind of like selling his time and not necessarily through a team. He'll talk a little bit more about how he does leverage teams and how he sets that up. But he kind of sells himself as an individual, whereas there's another way to do it where you kind of come in and say, we'll do everything for you, set up the entire engineering organization for an early stage startup. And that's an approach that we take at technical leaders to actually do kind of all in one, everything you need in a box to really just take everything off their plate, everything from like building the team, setting up, all the best practices and the culture that you'd expect. Oh, cool. Bill's about to pop on. So he'll go in a little bit more about how he structures that specifically. And then after he gives the overview, then the thought is we can open that up to kind of an AMA format. Anything you'd like to ask, expand on how he does things when it comes to clients, structuring the deals, how he presents the offer, any of those things. So, hey, Bill.
So sorry for being late. I was in another meeting that ran long, and you know how it is. Sorry to keep everyone waiting.
Hey, no problem. I was just kind of giving a little intro about, there's different ways to be a fractional CTO and position that to potential clients. And, it's kind of giving a brief intro for your system. So maybe you'd like to tell us a little bit more about, the overview of your model and kind of how you approach it, anything around clients, the offer and the deal itself, as well as maybe a little bit about the technical stack, but I think we can get into the details of that unless it comes up in the questions on another session.
And Bill, one thing I would be really interested in is we're using the decision-making framework. What we often do is we concentrate on what we do and how we do it. But one of the most useful pieces of information is why you made those choices. So if you can understand someone's decision-making, like why Bill did this, then you'll be able to identify with that, making that decision of what he does. So if you can explain, Bill, a little bit about why you've chosen this route, so people can understand, that'd be really, really useful, I think, for a lot of people. It's the bit that often gets missed out, and otherwise it just becomes a list of to-dos. So I appreciate that. That'd be lovely.
Okay. Well, let me start by talking about some basic rules I had to set for myself due to availability and what I'm capable of. So a framework for thinking about how I structure my business is with lanes. And I identified that for me, there are 3 chief lanes: literal coding, administrative work, and administrative thought. I can afford to have one active customer in each of those lanes at a time, because my brain breaks otherwise. So for instance, to be literally coding and have to, if I was to have 2 coding clients at one time, which actually describes me accurately right now because I have one project running long while another one started early, it breaks my brain to context switch and have to pick up my whole tech stack, change languages, and suddenly switch from working in serverless lambdas to working in containers, and switch from working in PostgreSQL with SQL queries to DynamoDB. It's too much. So I try to restrict there to being one client whom I actively code for at a time, one who I can do administrative work for, and one who I can do administrative thought for. Administrative work involves running stand-ups, hiring and firing, managing the team, putting tasks into ClickUp, Jira, Monday, Asana, whatever they use. Administrative thinking involves thinking about the future of the department, making major technical infrastructure decisions, pulling the trigger on integrations, partners, sources, vendors. So I can do each of these three things for one client at a time. I can maintain any number of clients in a hourly, on-demand, in case of emergency, break glass role. So when I say I have 9 tech startups, what I'm really saying is that I have one that I'm building code for, one that I'm running stand-ups and managing a team for, one that I'm doing long-term architectural thinking for, and 6 that I am in the slacks of, keeping my finger on the pulse, ready to jump in if they ever need something that requires Bill's level of attention or something in my area. So first, are there any questions about how I've structured my lanes?
So you're saying you actually have like separate terms of engagement for each particular client rather than kind of doing it all for each one?
Yes. As the present situation I'm in is showing, it is very difficult for me to code between 2 clients at a time. I need to complete one coding project, bundle it up, document it, turn it over, and shift into maintenance mode before I can earnestly take on a new one, because otherwise I can't ever work on them in the same day. That's my limitation.
Can I praise it in my language and the language of the training then? So what you do is you have three active clients, but one of them is very strategic, so that's your admin thought. It's about looking at the future. One is quite tactical. That's the admin work, making sure things are organized and working. And one is at operational level doing code. So you've leveraged your time because you're not writing code. You're not acting as a worker in all of them. You're acting as a strategic thinker and a tactical planner on the other 2. Is that a précis that makes sense?
Yes, that is a framing that makes sense. I have 2 clients for which I have a large degree of leverage. Yeah. I have 1 client for which I'm simply executing. And as we discussed on Monday's call, part of that is wanting to stay in the game. Because the time I put in at my coding client enhances my value for the other 2 clients by continuing to bring me new programming knowledge, keeping my fingers on the pulse of how things are done.
So Todd and I talk about this all the time. A lot of people, and we were talking about this yesterday, that it's a CTO of a startup is often, I can't remember what I phrased it, but the only tech person in the room. So they think they have to do all the coding. Yeah. So you only do that for one client at a time, so you can focus on it, do good work, but it really, you're getting paid to actually stay in the game with your coding skills and keep up to date and do interesting projects at that worker level in the genius zone. But the rest of them, the other 8, in one degree or another, you're using more leverage as an advisor or a strategic planner. So much more the chief operating officer, the chief technical officer, the CEO is strategic and tactical thinking. So Todd and I, we talk about this quite a lot, because you get this a lot, don't you, Todd? People come in as a startup, they almost think they have to be the one doing the coding.
Yep. Yeah, they don't even understand that it's possible to spread across multiple because they expect they're doing all the work all day, every day for each engagement. And that's just not the case.
Especially if they
shouldn't be. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially if they've come from being an active engineer of some description, an active worker.
Yeah.
And actually, well, no, they just look at this title, Chief Technical Officer. Yeah.
Yep.
Not worker. But Bill does that for his own agenda. To get paid for it.
Yes.
Yep.
Thanks, Bill. Exactly. I just wanted to put that through to people. I hope that makes sense. How are you seeing yourself? And how do you split your time up? And this is the Genius Zone model. Are you being a leader most of the time, or are you being a worker? And Bill spends most of his time as a manager or an innovator. And he spends the time he wants to spend as the coder to keep for his own agenda. Pretty smart, that, Bill.
Yeah, very. Can I ask a question, Bill, that's almost like a precursor question, which is like, what made you want to be a fractional CTO in the first place?
Yes.
And actually explore this business?
Yes, certainly. So let me tell the story of how I came to be a fractional CTO. I was a startup enthusiast. And after having one successful startup that exited, I moved to the next, where I was a poor fit and did not mesh well with the rest of the team. Then I moved to the next, and I was in love with the idea, but they ran out of capital a year in. That is par for the course when you're dealing with 0 to 1 people. And so I was back on the full-time job market, and I found a new full-time job. That startup ran out of capital 2.5 months in, which I'm still a little ticked about, because that's not wise use of your runway to hire somebody full-time that you only have the money to pay for 2.5 months. But when that one went belly up, I was still left maintaining it because the site was in zombie mode, and I still got to keep my equity. So now I need to do something to put the food on the table and still be able to do passing work for the zombie mode startup to keep it up and running, so maybe it'll come back to life one day. But I'm not able to seek full-time employment, or I relinquish my stock options. So I take a contract gig from someone who wanted me the first time around when I was interviewing for the previous job. This one is to build Hello Audio, the podcast hosting site. They don't want me full-time. They don't need me full-time. They just need me to build the darn site. So I do an hourly quote per project basis, about 25 to 35 grand to get their podcast site built. That keeps me very busy for about 4 months, and then I fall back into maintenance mode. Now I'm seeing a pattern where I want to hold on to my equity and use Kitch. I want to hold on to my equity in Hello Audio. Everyone has, as part of their life cycle with me, a point where the project is done and I don't make sense as a full-time employee anymore. So I'm going to embrace and walk face first into this model where people get me for a hot zone and then a cold zone. And then I stick around and keep my equity and I'm accessible forever. And so it kind of grew out of a series of startups that ran out of capital. Now, other people's mileage may differ if you are working with Series A or Series B startups. Those don't always go bankrupt overnight. But for me, focusing on 0 to 1, I realized that I couldn't keep working for 0 to 1 startups and not have them fail every 6 months. It was, it just wouldn't be a realistic expectation. And then you update your LinkedIn and you're like, I know for the last 6 months I've been a Foodly guy, but now I'm all in on Pebbler. And it's like, now you're doing another thing for another 6 months that runs out of capital. etc. So becoming a fractional was really a way to embrace this lifestyle. It made more
That makes
sense
a
for
lot
my
of sense.
clients too, because it made more sense for my clients too, because they did not have to break the bank paying me what I should be worth on the open market. I do an hour to 2 hours of work for each client a day, and they pay accordingly. And so they might be able to afford my retainer of $6,700 a month, where they couldn't afford the salary of, if I'm being honest, I should be, and I'm trying to say this with all humility, but on the market, I should be like a 250K engineer. And that's outlay of over 20 grand a month.
So you've brought this all together, this situation, and you actually, and so from looking at being an entrepreneur, there was a problem because you were taken on and they ran out of money. Yeah. So you needed to solve the problem of how to put food on the table. So the first level is what in problem solving I call the oh crap level. Oh crap, they've run out of money. Yeah, I'm in trouble. The second level is how do I solve the problem? So you needed to get yourself another gig. But what you've done is you've turned it into the third level of thinking, of problem solving, which is actually creating an opportunity where you've actually reinvented your reputation, your you know, who you are on LinkedIn almost. You know, this is what I do. So rather than it being you're jumping from one job to the next job, you're actually saying, no, this is what I do. I'm a startup king. You know, this is how I actually brand myself.
Yes, I have embraced and with open arms absorbed this persona. My LinkedIn description doesn't say a lot of things. My LinkedIn description just says, Bill Boulden, I take things to prod. And that's all, because that's all I care for people to know. I have a site, billboulden.com, with more information that I send to potential prospects. It's mostly testimonials. Anyone who's interested can check out billboulden.com to see how I market myself. But on LinkedIn, I'm just Bill Boulden. I take things to prod.
So the good thing there for people, you know, watching now, and you know, if you're going to be watching this later, is to remember in problems that there's high chances of opportunity. If you go just beyond, first of all, oh crap, I'm in trouble, I need to get some money. You know, what do I need to do to get some money? Yeah, and then you go back and you just find some work. I need to, you know, solve this problem. But actually the third level, and which is the entrepreneurial thinking level, is what opportunity can I create from this problem that I'm dealing with? And that's what Bill's done. He's created the opportunity to brand himself in a way that makes him stand out, does what he wants, and I suspect not only get the money in to put food on the table, you're racking up equity bets, aren't you, at the end of the day?
Yes, I have equity in half a dozen different companies. Me and my friends refer to them as lottery tickets because you never know which one will be Uber or Airbnb. And so I have lots of different lottery tickets, and it's just kind of fun. Some of them fail. Some of them go on to raise Series A. Some of them exit. But it keeps excitement in the game.
Yeah. So then and they're also invested in you, and this is when you can go into a management phase, when you can ramp down, and you can be there to support them if they want, and you're still invested because you have equity. So they have continuity. So this is about the value to Bill with this model, but also the value of the people hiring Bill to have Bill still involved.
I tell my clients when we're haggling over equity that it is in their best interest to give me equity because we want to create a situation where I win when they win. It will work out best for everyone involved. So, you know, when they're like, oh, I'd really prefer to not have to give up any of my company. And I'm like, it will be better for you if you do. Not saying you won't get my best effort regardless, but it's that equity that keeps my teeth in 2 years down the road, long after your product is launched. So I suppose I should talk about my packages, unless anyone has any other questions.
I'm just curious if you get full-on equity grants or if they're option grants. How do you structure that?
They're options because I don't like the tax hit of actually being granted equity.
Yep.
So to actually be given equity involves a tax penalty in the year you get it, which is no fun to pay that money when there is a 90% chance it will never be worth anything. But because I work with companies for such a short period of time, the standard in this industry is a 4-year vesting period with a 1-year cliff. And I can explain what this means if Anna or Jim or anyone isn't up on vesting periods and cliffs. I ask for a 1-year vesting period with a 3-month cliff because I expect to have successfully launched their business in about 3 months and have fully proven my worth at a year.
Bill, can I ask what's the reaction when they hear that as an offer, as a desire?
Yeah, they're usually on board. Sometimes they're mildly annoyed that they have to go talk to their lawyers to draw up a different contract. Because the lawyers are expensive and it winds up costing people $500 to $1,000 just to grant me equity in lawyer time. But that said, they all understand that the transformational effect I have on their business is not a 4-year impact. It's a getting you off the ground impact. It's because you have no tech right now and you're going to have a finished product when I'm done. And so they just see it as me looking out for what's the right engagement for me.
Do they? Does it make them believe in you more that you're asking for this short?
I would say that it indicates to them that I know what's up. I've done this many times now, and always with the same quick vesting schedule. And I think that when I'm like, look, I don't have an impact 4 years down the road. My impact is done at the 1-year mark. And so I'm just asking for something that reflects that. It seems perfectly fair. And it also shows confidence that this isn't going to be an 18-month slog.
So what Bill is doing this, so if there's anybody else, but my translation of this is he's doing what's known as a consultative, no, excuse my language. He's selling his services as the expert, not as a salesperson, but as an advisor. I'm the advisor who's done this before. I know better than you do, unless they're a person that has real experience. And they're paying for that service. And the sales style is as the consultant who has more knowledge than them. So it may jar them a little bit. It may shock them. May have to change the vesting terms, but actually they can build trust because you can tell them something that they never thought of, they didn't believe was possible, or whatever, and you actually show them the better route. So as an expert, that is the most efficient way of doing it. I know this stuff inside out, back to front. I will get you there in this period of time, and this is how I'm going to prove it to you. And I would like this vesting period. So he's been the expert salesperson, not someone going cap in hand. It's, I will do this for you, and this is how I recommend you do it because I've done it before.
Right.
Yeah.
That, and I talk about my portfolio of successful product launches. I've launched a dozen products, and some have exited, some have failed. But the point is, I launched them all, and I have learned the standard ways of building an application so many times that there's very little new under the sun besides your secret sauce that you can throw at me. So when someone comes to me and says, I have an app, I want an app that connects people who need their songs produced with audio engineers who can produce their songs. There is maybe some secret sauce in the audio engineering, but all this other stuff is cookie cutter, and I've solved it a dozen times before. How do people log in, right? Well, we'll use Auth0. How is the messaging going to work? The two-way messaging system. We'll use Twilio. How will email sending work? We'll use SendGrid. What kind of platform will it be on? Well, you could do containers, you could do serverless Lambdas. Here's the pros and cons of each. What database do you want? Here's the pros and cons. I've just seen it all, essentially. And that frees me up to actually spend my brain power on what their secret sauce is. So the special thing that sets their service apart from all the rest.
So if you're thinking about it yourself, you know, what will be your pitch? This is your expertise that you believe in, that you can, you know, you can prove to the marketplace that you can do quicker, better, faster, easier, cheaper, whatever, better than anybody else. So what's yours? I'm not asking you to say that now because we're listening to Bill, but just from the development point of view, what are the things that you can absolutely bulletproof say, yeah, I can make that happen for whatever client you're going after? And then this style that Bill is using is that of sales, because different sales styles, you know, everyone thinks the relationship seller or whatever else, but Bill, this is the style that has been proved to be the most effective, especially at this sort of thing. You are the expert, and it's not a sales pitch. It's an advisory to them. So they go, we can't do this without him. He's the best person to do it, which is a very different thing from pitching services. It's actually getting them to realize, wow, the value we've got, the experience we've got here. It's not a sales pitch in that respect. So what is it that you've got that you can do, which is, you know, your version of your offer? Cheers, Bill. Thanks. I'll let you crack on now. Thank you for that.
Yep. So I have 5 different packages that I sell, and I will go through them. I will also share my costs so that you know what I'm charging. I'm very curious if people think that it's too high or too low. Clearly, it's not too high because I'm finding work. It may be too low, but I'll go through my packages. So the first one and simplest is a power hour. A power hour is where someone can buy me for an hour to spitball their idea and get a general sense of what their next steps are. I sell this a lot to aspiring founders. This is people who have an idea for an app, but they don't even know where to begin. Should they hire devs? Should they outsource devs? Should they start collecting quotes? What kind of tech approach will they want? Do they even need to pump the brakes and do some product market fit validation that I'll advise them on before they start spending money on development, which is usually one of my biggest value adds. A lot of people come back to me with the testimonial that Bill Boulden saved me from spending $100,000, and it only cost me $500 to learn that. So a power hour is $500, payable via PayPal or Venmo because it's simple for such a small amount. And I will consider what they have, their challenges, and lay out the path forward for them. The next package up is a VIP day. A VIP day costs $3,000. And a VIP day is a single immersive day with a few hours of prep and a few hours of aftercare that solves one key problem. You need a new feature implemented. You need your DevOps pipeline set up. You need a transformative session for your dev team. You need a new infrastructure spun up. Whatever it is, if it's a solid day's worth of work aimed at a single goal, it's a VIP day for $3,000. I sell about one of those a month. My third package is the retainer model, which is for ongoing flexible engagements that I use for the administrative work and administrative thought lanes. Because that's more buying mind share of me. You're paying to continue to have me engaged, attending your stand-ups, and always have it on my mind. I'm in your company. That's $6,700 a month. And I have one client right now on that plan. My fourth model is project-based work, which is what I do for my coding work. For my coding work, which is always to bring a new project to production, I estimate out somewhere between 10 and 50 grand based on spec to build out their product. And then I build it. And then my fifth and final model, which I don't prefer, but is what I do for ongoing people who've extended beyond their project's lifetime, is $250 an hour for ad hoc support work. Like, I launched your dating app, it's done. The whole thing cost you 18 grand. Great. I'm in your Slack forever now. You need me. There's a problem. There's a bug. $250 an hour, build to the minute. So those are my prices. And I will tell you, and this is the big reveal, that I do not make as much this way as I would in a $250K a year full-time job. In the average month, I make $6,700 from my retainer client, $3,000 from a VIP day, somewhere between $500 and $1,500 off power hours, and an odd $1 or $2 grand off of hourly work. The whole thing adds up to somewhere between 100 and 150K a year, which is a little below market for my skill set. But in return, my needs and wants are not extreme. I don't have a giant home or anything, or a boat or whatever. So I make enough money to be happy. And I have complete and utter flexibility over how much I work, when I work, how I work. I don't have to put in 8-hour days. Some days, if I've done my job very well, I code for 2 or 3 hours, attend 2 stand-ups, tend to anything that needs tending to, and take the afternoon off to exercise, go on a bike ride. It's a great lifestyle. And so that was sort of the big reveal, was that for as high as these prices are, I actually am not rolling in it for what a tech person is used to. And I understand that it's the price I pay for my lifestyle.
Cool. So,
are there any questions about that?
Well, the observation that I advise people when they're looking at building their model is you have to build the model and this is what Bill was just talking about. The best way to build a model of what you want in terms of your own business is, what is it you want in terms of your lifestyle first? Because what we tend to do is we tend to think of, we get trained to go, these are the hours I'm told to work. This is my value. This is because we're told that by an employer. But when you move into doing it yourself or for yourself, you have to look at the marketplace. That's the other side, what the market will want and how you price that and the services you create. But if you only do that and you don't think about what you want for yourself, you can easily end up doing something you don't enjoy, you're not enthusiastic. So if I said to you, Bill, how much money would you need to earn for you to happily give up your lifestyle and the freedom and the flexibility that you have?
Probably $300,000 to $400,000.
Right. So that's the value. 200 grand is what the price of giving up the flexibility and the freedom to do and live the way he wants to live. So this is a really important thing, because if you don't understand what you want for yourself first, you'll build a model for somebody else. And my advice is build a model that works for you and works for the clients that you want to serve. But if you don't look at what you want first, you'll only think about the client model and then the marketplace model.
It's very tempting to think that if I was willing to work 40 hours a week, 9 to 5s, or in my case, because I have European clients, 7 to 3s, reversing out my hourly rate, I could be making upwards of $500,000 a year. But I simply choose not to. And I'm also older than I look and don't have that much power left to bang out code 8 hours a day anymore. Part of why I'm not seeking full-time development work. Lots of people want to hire me to be their full-time developer, but I tell them, like, I'm 40. I got 2-3 hot hours a day in me when the coffee is flowing, and you're getting that now. You could pay me for 8 hours a day, but the rest will be spent, I don't know, changing my editor settings.
So,
Bill, you're saying something that I've felt the whole time of being a developer, which is, I think if you're a high functioning developer, and after talking to you on Monday, you definitely appeared and seemed to be to me. I've always felt that way for myself. And programming is intellectually one of the hardest things I think you might do with all the plates you're spinning in the air. And I just don't think anybody good should really be programming more than 3 or 4 hours a day, honestly. I mean, there's some boilerplate nonsense you could be doing, maybe some test cases and other stuff that aren't cognitively very hard. They're just kind of going through rote stuff. But like legit business thinking is so hard to do for more than a few hours, has been my experience. Or you just start doing stupid things, or you just start filling the time because you feel like you need to, and then you start creating crap. So
that's why I
agree with that.
That's exactly why I have the lanes. So I have that coding lane, but then I still have mental and emotional energy with which I can do productive work. Well, I can then spend an hour in a UI UX meeting, and then I can spend, I can't spend 8 hours a day in a UI UX meeting. My eyes would bleed. But then I can spend an hour in a database planning meeting, etc. So it keeps it fresh. So I can fit in a full day's worth of work as long as I'm continually changing gears and using different parts of my brain.
That makes so much sense. Thank you, Bill.
So I think the important thing is to look at what's your definition of success. When you start to build your model of what you want, what is your definition of success? Because if you are going to go out on your own, do it for yourself, create your own business, side hustle, make sure it's your definition of success and not somebody else's. Because this is where the motivation will wane, it will disappear. You're doing what you want to do, how you want to do it. And this is what you get from being your own boss as the entrepreneur. And then who wants it? Now, you might have to jig it around a little bit. You have to get good at the marketing. You have to get it good at the, to make sure the market really wants it. And you might have to change that as the marketplace changes. But if you're not starting with your definition of success, then you won't enjoy it and you won't be enthusiastic, and it won't be easy to pitch. And Bill, you say you don't have great, outgoings but you're hoping for some of your bets to come off. the lottery tickets to come off and provide you with some real big cash in now, I presume.
Yeah. The whole dream is that one of these is an Uber or an Airbnb, and I, make $5 million on my 0.5% and retire comfortably. But even then, I would still keep doing what it is I do, because it's the life I want to leave. Like if I woke up tomorrow morning and I learned that Hello Audio exited for 100 mil and I was suddenly wealthy, I would keep doing my job, maybe 1 or 2 fewer clients. But like, what else am I going to do? Play Magic the Gathering all day? That's what I do with half my day as it stands.
Which of the 5 things would you drop?
I would probably simply shift into accepting more advisory clients and maybe finally get off the coding, because I feel as though I'm at the tail end of my career with my ability to code. Every 2 to 3 years, I've lost an hour a day of code output. And it won't be long before there's not much left and I need to be completely a manager or an advisor. That sounds like dark and foreboding, but it simply is what it is. The old neurons don't fire as fast as they used to when I was 22.
Cool.
I'm gonna inject something else for you, Bill. The other thing that I think you might have going on for yourself is that you are so efficient with what you're doing, and it's so cognitively dense what you are doing, that you're getting far more done in those 3 hours than you probably did in 6 or 7 way back when, because a lot of the holes and things you're going to fall into. So give yourself some more credit, man. You're not dead yet, buddy. You got a long time left.
Yeah.
And so I feel the same way. Like I got out of programming day in and day out when I was 33, because I kind of felt the same way, but it was the same way in a different vein, in that I just felt like there was a design human factors thing that I couldn't find. And I was delivering stuff far in excess of anyone else, and it was just mentally exhausting. And I found a sales thing, which I've been doing for a long time on the technical pre-sale side, which, Todd, I read your email this morning, which is a fascinating email. And I'm not sure where I could help with that, but I definitely have thoughts at some point, not today or next week, but in the future, for sure, for you all.
Awesome. I think what you're just pointing out, Jim, is it's not necessarily about like the hours spent on keys, how many lines of code you pushed. It's about the value that you deliver to the business, right? And so the more experienced and your expertise is just compounded over the years, especially with so many companies you've helped, each hour of work is more valuable than someone else that they would maybe potentially try to hire that hasn't had that experience. So I think that's an important point. It's not necessarily about hours spent on keys.
Remember, my favorite word in the whole of this is leverage. And this, you have experience, you have knowledge. This is leveraging, and this is creating your value through the leverage you can bring. And that's where, and Todd and I have had this conversation already. I want to work less hours, but more leveraged. I want to produce more doing less. Because Bill, you're a puppy, mate. Sorry, you're young compared to me. So, so that's the thing to think about when you're looking at this. What is the value of what you do, not the hours that that you can put in, because that is what being C-suite is about. And if you're doing loads and loads of hours at C-suite level, then you're working too damn hard. Now, sometimes you have to put the hours in, but the aim is to leverage your time and the experience of other people and develop them and all the stuff we do in the regular session. Cool, Bill. Really good. Thank you. Really useful.
Yeah, I hope everyone has benefited from this deep dive look into how I run my business and how I put food on my table.
Super cool. Thank you so much, Bill.
Yeah, appreciate you showing everything and pulling back the curtain for us. Maybe at follow-up questions after this as people think about it. And I think Slack might be a good place for that, to potentially tee off other discussions or other topics for calls.
Yeah, I had the benefit of talking to Bill on Monday, and Bill, again, thank you for that. And it's just been in my head since we talked that I just don't think your prices are big enough and enough. And I know that that changes the dynamics, and that might hurt you for some things. And I've got a buddy of mine who does an agency, Google marketing, and he just fired a client who's treating him terribly. And he's brought in like 4 new ones because he's too busy. Like, think about this, right? And he's like, dude, you got to start charging more money. Like, if people are falling at your feet to give you money and you're working 40, 60, 70 hours a week, and I get, he's always a catastrophist and the economy is all, we're all going to have the, we're going to be the, what is it? The Ryback or whatever, or not Ryback, whatever it was in Germany, the Weimar Republic, right? Our dollars are going to be wheelbarrow fulls of money, right? That's where he always is at. And I'm like, whatever. Anyway, I like keep telling him like, dude, I'm going to take 20% and I'm going to triple your rates and you're going to make more money. Like, I'll be your sales guy. And he's like, oh man, no, I don't know about that. But like, that's kind of where I feel like you are, Bill, with your experience, what you're doing, the time compression you're offering, and even the equity that you're talking about taking. I'd love to hear what Todd and others are doing, but I think you probably should be asking for more than what you're doing. And I'm not going to say the number because you haven't said it yet, but those are my 2 or 3 thoughts for you, is like just a little bit more, or maybe even a lot more,
Last one on what Jim said. You're definitely not charging enough. That's my opinion.
Yeah, exactly.
You are worth much more.
Yeah. I mean, your 250 number is probably a little light in my opinion, honestly, for what you could bring based on, again, how we've talked. But that's at 2,000 hours a year. That was 115 an hour, 130 an hour when I did the math quickly. And I think you're well in the rate of like your hourly time should probably be billed out at $1,000 an hour, or at least the equivalent of it with leverage, or at least trying to figure out how to get there. And I think with your 30-minute to 3-hour thing that you talked about, you're probably not that far away if you could raise that retainer just slightly. Okay.
I'm very open to all this feedback. I certainly like hearing that I can make more money. I will go in the tank on this. It might be too soon to raise my rates because I just raised them start of the year, but everyone's got good cover right now because of inflation. And I can say that the business realities have changed.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, like you said earlier in this call, which I thought was a brilliant statement, like you're taking people from 0 to maybe not done, but viable.
Yep.
And probably a little bit of lovable, based again on your skill set and what you're talking about, right? Like I've always talked about, like, I don't really care about a minimum viable product. I want a minimum lovable product, because they are 2 very different mindsets. And I argue with engineers all the time, at least in the day job, about the fundamental difference there, because you can always point at something that needs to be viable, but lovable is a lot harder to think about. But if you get that right, it's so much easier to do everything else you have to do.
Yeah, I saw a tweet earlier today that was like, startups be out here bringing junky, janky MVPs out and then saying they never found product market fit with them.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Like, and it's off. I mean, to me, after a hard 15 to 10 years of design user experience thinking, like, I know in a heartbeat whether you've put the time in to really dot the I's and cross the T's. Like, yeah. And most things don't. I mean, most things, they're just like, we're done, we're moving on, next thing.
So again, we're coming to the end of this, but the session, but great points from Jim, but you got the feedback from Anna and from Jim there, Bill, this being a mastermind. And as to raising your prices, because you've raised them a little while ago, I would actually say that doesn't matter. Okay. If you are in demand and you create value more than you're paid, then there is no reason why you can't put your prices up again. But often what happens is, and I just made a note, we're going to be talking about this in another session, is that often we have a perception of our ceiling value, of what we allow ourselves to believe we're worth. And so we're going to do some sessions on that, on how to how to break that belief, because that can be very scary to break that belief. But when you're getting feedback from people, your peers and, you know, your colleagues who can see you are doing that, they can say it till the cows come home, but actually for you letting yourself is the mechanism of letting that that ceiling be pushed through. But you don't have to wait because you put your prices up a while ago. It's actually the evidence is coming from the marketplace that you can.
Yeah, I've spent the last 2 years in groups not unlike this one around group coaching programs. And when I think about the realism and the actuality of being an engineer and a software person and the brain power that that takes, and we're being recorded, I shouldn't say this, but I look at some of these coaches and what they're doing and what they're offering, and what they are charging and what they deliver ultimately, and the lack of an experience around all that. Dude, we all should be charging way more than we ever are. You know, for me in my day job, you know, Todd for this program, you know, Bill for what you're doing. Like, you know, and I think Steven sort of got there, which is that you know, one of the mentors guys that I've talked to in these programs for 2 years, he's like, you know, the money doesn't really matter if you deliver the outcome and people are happy with that outcome at the price point you've told them, and especially if you over deliver on that, no one really cares. Right? Like if you charge for a year-long $2,000 coaching program that's one group call a month, and you promise this outcome and people get it 80-90% of the time, everybody's more than happy. Right? So think about that. And I agree with you that, Stephen, that the pricing mindset is really hard to get out of.
So one of the things is we have to convince ourselves first, and then we have to be practically good at convincing others. Because if you know you're going to get the result, you know, after the year, in Bill's analogy, you know, then you go, well, why didn't I do it? Okay. So the skill is actually convincing other people, but the first person you have to allow yourself to be convinced by is yourself that you're worth it.
I actually find it to be very, very useful to have somebody else who's in a similar industry or in a similar position, and then you run your pricing by them, because you think, oh my goodness, I am charging way too much money. And then that person says, no, you are worth much more than that. So having somebody to call you out on is absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. And one of the things Bill said on our call is that he'll typically hire 4 engineers. Well, if you've ever been in the hiring seat, at least at the enterprise level, you know, it's nothing to be build out 10, 20, 30% of what that salary will be for that person. I mean, when I got my current job, I'm pretty sure I think I was told they paid 25, 30 grand for the recruiter that found me. And man, if I talked to that guy 3 hours total, I'd be amazed, right? Like that is a thing for sure. And I think that's probably the easiest place to point to as to how you can justify raising your rates in your own head, that to go find a recruiter, to go put people into a company and then manage them is easily 10, 15, 20 grand a head, easily in my mind. Right. So
yeah, I'll keep that in mind next time I'm on a hiring gig.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I think, you know, you're content and happy with where you are, but you know, it's the next thing that you're looking at is to really think about the next pivot to increase your rates. Right. That's the next logical inflection point. I think your power hour rate is probably spot on. You probably could go to 1,000 if there's more people showing up than you can deal with, you know, doubling that. And then your VIP day, I think, is probably a little light for what you're offering, potentially, even at 3 grand in my mind. I mean, I think about like at the day job at Red Hat, our enterprise architects, who I don't think are really all that great at times, are 600 to 800 an hour, right? I don't think you probably are at that, could be there, but you're probably close.
Yeah.
And like, if you go to like a thing like an Accenture for some of this big thinking you're offering, I mean, those clowns want, you know, 100, 200, 300 grand just to like talk to them for a week or two, you know, and you're probably bringing a lot more density of information in an hour than those guys would bring in 3 months of work. So it's something to think about. You could justify a lot more than you're giving yourself credit for, buddy.
Thank you, Jim.
I think another way of thinking is people are paying you because they are investing that money to get a return. So what is the value that you're bringing? Are you bringing them $50,000 of value for $3,000?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the VIP day is gonna head north to 4 or 5 grams soon.
6. Let them push back.
Push till you start hearing no's.
Exactly. Right. And then the other thing, again, I don't know if you talked about the equity thing that you're asking for, and I agree they are lottery tickets, but again, I think you probably could ask for a little bit more percentage.
So there I'll
that.
gently push back. I'll share with the group if people are interested. That I typically ask for 1%, which it's my understanding that people who get too much equity don't get paid. Amounts like 25, 50%, that's reserved for founders, co-founders, and people who lead rounds.
Right, exactly. That's not where I'm at when I say that. Like, I'm like 5% for you is probably a decent number. And maybe that's a 3-year thing or a 2-year thing. Your 1% for a year is, to me, maybe a little light. Maybe that's 2.5 for a year with the same vesting schedule you talked about. But then if you get to year 2 and 3, you probably should get more.
Right.
I don't know, something to think about. And I get that that's the area for people to push back on, but then that's where the knobs of what you're charging, the equity can go down. See it, Stephen. No problem. The knobs of the equity going down and the money coming up can, turn with each other. And they're probably exponential, right? They're not logarithmic. That if you want to go from, just keep the numbers easy, 10 grand and 1%, and you talked about half for that 1%. So maybe it's 5 grand and 1%, but they're like, no, I don't want to give you 1%. They give you 0.5%. Well, then my fee is now 8 grand and not the 7,500, which would be the math. And I'm hoping I did all that math right. You're nodding, so I think I kept up. Something to think about.
Yeah, no, that's a good way, because you can reverse the value of equity into what you actually charge. And if you have those 2 levers, then you can play with those balances. So if they know what the company's valued at with the equity, or they should have some sense, and you can kind of then use that to reverse engineer the value you're bringing. Although in the earliest stage, they may not have value yet, right? Because it's kind of, you're creating that value, that initial value. So maybe when they look to raise, you can understand what that value was. We could probably do maybe a whole session on just how to go about pricing potentially. Clearly, this is like a hot topic, and I think I'm always wondering, what we're charging. And I think that's the value of this kind of session, is understanding what the market is tolerating in different nooks and crannies, and kind of how that changes over time. So this is really good.
Yeah, a very good
I have
point
another meeting I
on-
need to run to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Anna. Yep.
I just wanted to say a very good point on charging people until they say no, and they say you're crazy for that, like for asking this kind of money. That's what I do when I look for a new job, because every time I switch jobs, I get like 20, 30, up to 50% raise, because that's how it is in tech.
Yeah.
And the first thing that I always say, I'm like, okay, let me go absolutely crazy and say, I want to make this much money based on my research. And people usually say, yeah, that's about how much we were planning on paying. I'm like, this is actually really nice.
Yep. Good way to do price discovery. Bill, thank you for sharing everything. This was a great session, and I hope everybody liked this. We'll do more of these, and I suspect there'll be more questions as we think about this. Oh, there's the baby. Beautiful.
That's strong, Anna. Wow.
Very cute.
Thank you
Powerful.
for having me, Todd. I really appreciate it.
Yes.
And Bill, thank you
Awesome.
so much again. Like, this
Thank
is
you
just
so much.
Yeah, this is gold.
Awesome. All right. Bye.
All right, everybody. Have a great
Thank
rest of your
you.
week. We'll
Bye-bye,
talk more in
guys.
Slack about questions. See ya.
Yeah. Todd, are you going to talk about what you do in 2 weeks on this call?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, do the other model next. And there
Perfect.
may be other models, but these are the 2 that I'm
Yeah.
aware of. So yeah, we'll talk about that more in the next one.
Sweet.